Try this. Without looking anything up, explain how interest rates actually affect inflation, or what was actually in the last major bill Congress passed, or why the two countries on the front page of your news app this morning keep ending up there. Countries on the front page of your news app this morning keep ending up there. If you can't, you're in good company. You're probably not even uninformed in the traditional sense. You saw all of the stories, you scroll past the headlines, you watch the analysis clips. We have more access to information than any humans in history, but access has not translated into trust, shared context, or actual understanding. For most of the 20th century, being informed was a settled idea. It meant reading a daily newspaper or watching the evening news. It meant exposure to a small number of sources that were assumed to roughly agree on what the facts were. The question was whether you bothered to consume the news. The answer to "Are you informed?" was binary, and almost everyone who said yes meant the same thing by it. That word is gone. And the strange thing is, it didn't disappear because we worse at finding information. It disappeared because we got radically, almost incomprehensibly better at it. We are going to look at how that happened. More importantly, we're going to look at what it actually means now, in 2026, to be informed. Because if you are working from the old definition, the one that involves sitting in front of water Cronkite at 6:30 p.m., you almost certainly think you're informed but you aren't. In the 1970s, Walter Cronkite famously signed off the CBS Evening News with the line, "And that's the way it is." It is almost impossible to imagine a news anchor saying that today without it sounding like a punchline. But in his era, it landed because it was close enough to true. When Gallup first began measuring trust in the news media in the 1970s, between 68 and 72% of Americans expressed a great deal of fair amount of confidence in newspapers, television, and radio to report their news fully, accurately, and fairly. By October 2025, that number has fallen to 28%. A record low. In 1973, 74% of Democrats and 68% of Republicans both said they trusted the news media. They were essentially on the same page. That kind of cross-partisan trust in an institution is now nearly unimaginable. As recently as 1980, an average of 52.1 million Americans watched one of the three nightly network newscasts. Today, the combined audience is roughly 20 million. Less than half of what it was. Nearly 1 in 4 Americans, including children, watched a network evening news broadcast on a given night in 1980. Imagine that, a single broadcast watched by tens of millions of people at exactly the same time, telling them the same things in the same order with the same emphasis. You can disagree about whether that was good. There were obvious downsides. A narrow set of gatekeepers decided what counted as news, and the entire perspective were structurally excluded. But for the question of whether being informed meant something specific and shared, the answer was yes, it did. The infrastructure of being informed was visible, finite, and standardized. That infrastructure no longer exists. It didn't just decay, it was actively replaced. And the replacement is so much larger and so much more abundant than what came before that we still haven't fully reckoned with what it costs us. The shift from Cronkite board to ours wasn't a single change. It was 3 changes happening at the same time, each reinforcing the other. The first was scarcity to abundance. A large majority of US adults, 86%, now say they at least sometimes get the news from smartphone, computer, or tablet, including 56% who say they do so often. The number of sources is not larger by some factor or 2 or 10. It is effectively infinite. Any individual can publish, any individual can broadcast, and any individual can build an audience that rivals the ones the news networks used to have. The second change was centralized to fragmented. Facebook and YouTube now outpace all other social media sites, as places where Americans regularly get news. 38% of US adults say they regularly get news on Facebook, and 36% say the same thing about YouTube. Smaller shares regularly get news on Instagram, 20%, TikTok, 20%, or X, formerly Twitter, about 12%. Overall, about half of US adults, 53%, say they at least sometimes get the news from social media. But these are not three networks competing for the same audience. They are platforms where every individual user gets a different version of reality, shaped by what they have clicked on, who they are followed, and what algorithms have decided will keep them watching. The third change was editorial to personalized. About 1 in 5 US adults, 21%, say they regularly get news from news influencers on social media. Among adults aged 18 to 29, that number rises to 38%. And among Americans who get news from news influencers, 52% say most of these influencers are independent and not connected with any news organization. This is genuinely new. For the first time in modern history, a large share of the public gets its news from individual personalities, many of whom operate outside the editorial system, fact-checking layers, and institutional accountability associated with traditional newsrooms. Some are excellent, some are not. From the outside, it can be hard to tell which is which. The result is not just that we have more news. We have a fundamentally different relationship with information than any given generation before us, and it is breaking us in ways we only beginning to understand. In 2002, two researchers at Yale, Leonid Rosenblit and Frank Keel, published a paper on the journal Cognitive Science titled "The Misunderstood Limits of Folk Science: An Illusion of Explanatory Depth." It has become a highly cited finding in cognitive psychology. The experiment was simple. They asked people how well they understood ordinary everyday objects like zippers, flush toilets, and speedometers. Most people rated their understanding as pretty good. Then the researchers asked them to actually explain how the object worked, step by step. The participants almost always failed. And here is the key finding. Adults consistently overestimated the depth of their explanatory knowledge, but through the act of providing an explanation, they recognized their initial illusion of understanding. The gap between what we think we know and what we can actually explain is large, and it's invisible to us until we try to close it. The illusion only applies to a specific kind of knowledge. It is far stronger for explanatory knowledge than for other kinds of knowledge, such as facts, procedures, or narratives. If I ask you the capital of France, you either know it or you don't. There is no illusion. But if I ask you how inflation actually works, what causes it, how interest rates affect it, why some economists disagree about all of these, you might feel like you understand it until you try to say it out loud. Now, apply the finding to news. Every time you saw a headline this week, every time you scrolled to a thread, every time you watched a 1-minute video explaining a crisis somewhere, your brain encoded something like, I know about that. It felt like understanding, it registered as informed. But almost none of them was explanatory knowledge. It was exposure. The headline gave you the conclusion without the chain of reasoning. The thread gave you a take without the underlying mechanism. The clip gave you a feeling about an event without the historical or political context that will let you actually explain it. We are living through the largest expansion of information access in human history, and simultaneously the largest expansion of the illusion of being informed. The two are not in tension, they are the same thing. Exposure without explanation creates the feeling of understanding without the substance of it. The more headlines you see, the more confident you become that you understand topics you could not actually describe to a curious child. This is the part most people miss. The problem with the modern information environment is not that it is full of misinformation, although it is. The deeper problem is that it is full of accurate information that creates inaccurate confidence. So what does it actually mean to be informed in 2026? The first shift is from exposure to evaluation. In the Cronkite world, the relevant question was whether you had been exposed to the news that day or not. The gatekeepers had done the evaluation. Now, we know gatekeepers, the evaluation is the work. Where did this come from? What is this source's track record? What are they not telling me? Who will disagree with this and why? These are not optional skills anymore. They are the skills. The second shift is from quantity to depth. In a world of infinite headlines, the temptation is to keep scrolling. But if the illusion of explanatory depth is real, then scrolling through 50 stories produces less understanding than reading one of them carefully. Knowing one issue at a level where you could actually explain it is more valuable than recognize 50 issues at a level when you cannot. The third shift is from consumption to verification. In a 2025 global survey by the Reuters Institute, 58% of people say that they were worried about what is real and fake online when it comes to news. In the United States, that number was 73%. The honest response to a media environment you cannot fully trust is not to consume more of it. It is to verify more of what you consume. The fourth shift is the hardest. From feeling informed to being able to explain. The test of being informed today, it is not whether you saw the story. It is whether you can take the story to someone who disagrees with you and explain it in a way that they recognize as fair, even if they reach a different conclusion. By that test, most of us are not informed about most things, including me, including probably you. We did not lose the ability to be informed. We lost the infrastructure that used to do the work of being informed for us. The networks, the editors, and the gatekeepers were never perfect, and we are not going back to them. But they handled the evaluation, the verification, and the depth so that the public could just consume. Now that infrastructure is gone, and almost none of us have replaced it with anything. We have replaced it with feeds, and the feed is not infrastructure. The feed is opposite of infrastructure. It is designed to make you feel informed without making you actually informed, because that feeling is what keeps you scrolling. Being informed used to be a status you could achieve by paying attention. Now it is a skill you have to practice on purpose, and almost nobody is doing it. Thank you for watching.